Choosing the right dependency is important. These are packages that we bring into our code base that are maintained externally. Let's talk about four things you should be thinking about when bringing these packages in. The fourth one might not be what you expected. The first question that you should be asking yourself is this project actively maintained and will it be for the foreseeable future? Now, for these purposes in this example, we're going to use MailChimp. So we're going to go find a package that we can use to interact with the MailChimp API. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Packagist is well, at the very top, it says the PHP package repository. This is where Composer gets its information to find and use these packages. This is where we can create an account and set our packages so that other people can pull them. So if we're looking for a package to integrate with MailChimp, we would come in here and we can search in MailChimp. And we'll get tons of choices. Now this is where the dilemma comes in. Now remember, our first question is this project actively maintained and will it be for the foreseeable future? And some of the metrics that I use to determine whether or not this is actively maintained and will it be for the foreseeable future is, are PRs being closed and are issues being closed? Are they being replied to? Are they being acknowledged, etc.? So let's take a look at this MailChimp marketing one. So this MailChimp marketing one appears to be the official package from MailChimp. Now, if we notice, looks like there's one pull request. It looks like people are responding to that, so that's good. This one appears to be open, maybe a little long, but that tends to happen on these open source projects because most times people aren't paid to maintain these, although this is one from MailChimp themselves. If we go back to here, we can look at the closed ones. It looks like they've closed other PRs that have been open. Notice there's no issue tabs in this one for particular because they must have disabled that. Let's look at what our other options are for interacting with the MailChimp API. Again, we want to figure out whether or not this package is actively maintained and potentially will it be for the foreseeable future. Now, if we're looking at the official one from MailChimp, chances are this is going to be maintained for the foreseeable future. Now, that's going to be the benefit for going with, an official package from the company. Like that's going to be a huge benefit there. Now let's take a look at, I guess before we do that, let's take a look at the number of downloads because this is just, you know, one data point in order to make your decision, but let's take a look at this MailChimp API. Okay, so right away, the difference that we can see is looks like the last release was in 2018. Looks like they've set up Scrutinizer, which is to help with maybe some static analysis and code quality, etc. This is also saying that it requires PHP 5.3 and above, which is a bit outdated. PHP currently, as of right now, is on PHP 8.2, so supporting 5.3, which has been end of life for a few years now, may be kind of risky. If we look at our issues here, we can see that potentially we've got a bunch of open issues that aren't being responded to, and we've got a bunch of closed issues, which is great. It looks like the last closed issue was April 24th of this year, and prior to that was maybe April 2020. So again, we're just looking for indicators on whether or not we think this package is going to be maintained right now and in the foreseeable future. So if we do come into these issues, we want to know that if we have a problem, somebody can help us, or the package might be updated. So the second question we want to be asking ourselves is the package up to date with general best practices? So when we think about some general best practices, we might think about code quality, code coverage, testing. Are they supporting outdated PHP versions, etc.? So if we go back to this one, I would say that in general, the scrutinizer 8.51 is probably pretty good. It looks like we've got a build error, so that's kind of a knock against this package. When we think about best practices, we're thinking about using Composer to auto load. We can just, we see that there's a few alternatives here to include this stuff, which most people aren't really using anymore. Again, I think the latest release was in 2018, so perhaps it was more common 4 years ago. Not so much anymore. We would just go with something like this. So we're just kind of checking to see, just kind of getting a feel for the package. It looks like we do have tests here. Looks like it says adds PHP 8, which is great. We want to just be looking at these tests to see what's the code quality like for these tests. Click around, really inspect the package, go through the source, and take a look at how they're going about doing the code. Do we potentially see any security vulnerabilities, etc. Nothing super deep, but you definitely want to take a peek. Especially if you're working for a company, you want to be making sure that the dependency that you're pulling in is going to be rock solid, because chances are, you're going to be relying on that package for quite a while if you can't get time to refactor to using a different package in the future. So this one looks like, let's take a look at the scrutinizer. If we click into this, we can see some of like the reasons why it's got an 8.51 from scrutinizer. It looks like a lot of this stuff is 5 or 6 years old. I'll zoom in a little bit. We can see that, yeah, this is like 5 or 6 years old. And you can click into these various different things around here just to find out a little bit more about the code quality with scrutinizer. If we go back to the MailChimp official package, we can see that this one doesn't really have anything to do with code quality or testing coverage. A lot of packages in PHP will have the badges just like you saw on the other one, where it says like, how much the coverage is for the code, etc. And so those are good things to look out for, because that means that people care about this. I know that this package in particular, this code is actually automatically generated. I'm not really sure from what, but I'm hoping that wherever it's automatically generated from, that there are tests for that code here. And we can see that there's a PHP unit XML here. So chances are that, they're using tests somewhere, but it's not necessarily displayed here. So if we look at the releases on this package, we can see the last release was November 2nd. We've got August 2nd, April 14th. So we kind of know that in general that this package is probably going to be maintained for the foreseeable future. In terms of the best practices for this package, it's kind of up in the air, but I think we can rely on MailChimp for not necessarily making a great PHP package, but at least they will support the package, in the future. So if you have questions, a lot of people are paying for subscription, so hopefully they would, honor any support, if you were to reach out. So that's something to look out for there. So again, the second question is the package up to date with general best practices, meaning code quality, code coverage? Is it following standards that people are using in 2022, 2021, etc. So those are the things that you're going to watch out for that. Now, the third question is going to be, does the package have documentation? So let's look at the MailChimp one here, and we can tell that for this particular package, the documentation appears to be pretty good. It explains how you can use this package in a pretty easy way. So like they even have a quick start. So I think that's going to be an important thing if you're just trying to get a feel for the package, whether or not they dedicated some time to the documentation. So let's think about the scenario where you're on a team and the documentation is poor. Now you'll be in charge of explaining to everybody how to use the package because the documentation is poor. Versus if the package has good documentation, you could just refer everybody to the documentation. That's going to save you time. It's going to save the company time and money down the road, because the package maintainer should be actively maintaining the documentation as well. And they give different examples on how to do all these other things all the endpoints, etc. So let's look at this other package so we can compare what that looks like. So again, this package also has examples about how to use the package. So again, these are just really good data points to determine whether or not this might be a package or maybe we should rule this package out. One thing that I did want to mention is that if we look up just MailChimp/MailChimp, you might run into this in the future, is that this is another package from MailChimp directly. However, this package has been marked as abandoned. So this is most likely a package that you would not want to include in your code when you're bringing in your next package or your dependency. And even if we click into the Bitbucket link, or if we just look at Composer here, we can see that there's a specific message that says that this is abandoned, and actually says you should see this other marketing package instead. And this is the one that we were looking at before. I wanted to bring that to your attention because it's important that we're looking out again for these indicators on whether or not a package is a good package to be bringing into your project, because you will be spending time potentially fixing bugs or how to use the package, or perhaps your teammates are doing the same as well. So it's going to be really important to be thinking about that in the future. Okay, so the last point and the last question that I want to make is, does the package have a license? Now, this might be surprising, but is very important, because the package without a license, in my opinion, is a liability. If you bring this package in without a license, this just potentially opens the company up to a lawsuit in the future, because different licenses have different terms. And so sometimes packages or sometimes licenses have terms where, if you're using this package, you must also open source your code. Or if you're using this particular package and it has a license, you must attribute, the code somewhere, on your website or publicly that you're using the code. If we're not paying attention to the licenses that some of these packages have, you could really open yourself up to a lawsuit later on down the road. So this is definitely something you would want to check out. And if you're unsure about the licenses, there's a great website called opensource.org that kind of explains the different licenses, I guess the different popular licenses that are out there, that are common for open source code. So I highly recommend just giving this a glance, and just so you have a general understanding of what some of these licenses mean. Extra questions that you might want to be asking yourself, and is the package popular? Because popular packages tend to be maintained. Now, that's not always the case. I think we've seen that over time and time again, but it's something to consider when you're going back and forth between packages. So that's just another thing that to keep in mind. And then another one might be, are people supporting the package monetarily? One other thing we might want to consider when we're talking about, is the package still being installed by people? We can click this installs link here, and we can kind of see the graph of, is there a trend of more people installing it? Is there not? It looks like since 2017, the trend has kind of just been down. We can see it goes up and down, but in general, it tends to just go down. Those are the top 4 questions that I ask myself when I'm bringing in my dependency. Let me know what you use in the comments in terms of data points and questions that you're asking yourself.